Hello and welcome to Conversations Live with Keri Smith of the Deprogrammed podcast. Keri, how you doing?
I'm good, Benjamin. It's nice to see you in
Good
your
to see
flat
you too.
cap. I feel
Yeah,
like I should be wearing one with you. I
I
have one.
know. Do you have a bonnet?
I don't think I have a bonnet.
No, but you do have like a shit kicker hat, if
I
that's the
do.
right
I've got
thing.
I've got quite a few. I'm what a woman of many hats.
So we're gathered here together to talk about internet phenomena, or maybe it's a real life phenomena called the woke right. I don't know how real it is, but it certainly does have. I mean, people are summoning it by naming it and trying to define this set of behaviors or set of beliefs or set of people, and it keeps on switching. The term keeps on switching. Who's applying it to what? So it's a very porous term. I've come out against it from the very beginning because I knew it was going to be used to stifle communication between people on the right and people in the center. To draw lines where lines don't need to be, rather draw lines rather than build bridges. But you have a different tact and vision of it. And what's that?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to have this conversation. What I have seen online is much of the same thing you are seeing, I assume. So we probably agree on this part that there's a lot of a sorting happening of sorts.
Hmm.
There's a lot of infighting. There are people who used to agree on or have agreed on a lot in the past who are finding themselves disagreeing on this issue. And I've joked that I haven't seen this many people I respect disagree on something this much since the Barbie movie. But it's
Wow.
true. It's a little joke though, because the Barbie movie's not as serious, right? But
I
I
don't
did
know.
see
It's
a lot of
profound. It's a very profound show.
True. I did see a lot of people I respect all on different sides of that movie. But I do. I see a lot of people I respect who are disagreeing with me or and then I see people I respect who agree. But it's the disagreements like yourself that I find very interesting and I wish there were more people speaking with each other instead of there's a lot of speaking past each other online.
Yeah.
So thank you, first of all, for being open to having this conversation. Um, and as far as well, great, we probably agree on this other point as well. When I first heard that phrase, which was actually years ago, um, you know,
Mm.
a lot of people are crediting James Lindsay with coining it, but I would say he has popularized it. He's the reason, one of the reasons it's become very popular online right now, the phrase. But he didn't coin it, and I saw it many years ago. I know Neil Shenvi, who's a Christian writer and author, had written an article about woke right. I don't even think he was the first one to use it. I think other. Anyway, the point being, when I first heard it, I really bristled at it, and I
Mm.
was like, "This is not a good idea,"
Okay.
because, and I was vocal about this online that I did see the ideology, this sort of emerging set of beliefs happening among some people who claim to be on the right, but I didn't think tactically it was a good idea to call it woke right because I was, in my opinion, it was sort of, look, we're just getting to a place where the average person is starting to understand what woke means to be able to effectively fight back against the woke left
Hmm.
in their schools, on their school boards, to understand, have an understanding of that term.
Yeah.
And if we undo that by defining this other emerging identitarian set of beliefs, in my opinion, if we define it as woke right, if we term it that, if we call it that, that's going to dilute the word woke. And so I really, for a long time, was sort of not using the phrase, but agreeing that I saw this thing happening, but like, can we come up with a better word, or can
Yeah.
we use one of the old words? And it
Well, let's
wasn't
focus.
until
Let's zero in.
okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on. Go on. It wasn't
Well,
until recently. Yeah.
recently things have changed. I do think I'm at the point now where I do think woke right is appropriate because it's evolving, right? Like all of this ideology, this identitarian stuff is sort of evolving. And I'm starting to see some very striking similarities with woke left. And I don't know if you want me to lay those out now. Maybe that would
Yeah,
be a good
yeah.
place to
What would
get
that
into
be?
or not.
I was just going to zero
So,
in on identitarianism because that,
okay.
from a liberal point of view, that is coded as negative. But I don't think that liberals necessarily like to admit that they're just as identitarian as anybody else because they are human. Identity and group identity is what we are as social creatures. Our minds, our language, our very language, the way in which we communicate our personalities, our most real experiences, our thoughts, our emotions, is all communal. That's all from a shared identity. English, French. Like it's very obvious that we are identitarian. Now, there could be negative or positive identities or ways of encountering and using identity to affect your will or to be a part of some sort of political project. There's negative and positive values to that, but identitarian, it just that in and of itself, if we don't look at what is in that and like be really honest with that phenomena, then we can't tell the difference between good identities and bad identities or proper and improper identities.
I would agree with all of that.
Yeah.
I actually would agree with that. I think the negative aspects of what I more broadly call identitarianism come in when there are these assumptions, these value judgments given to a person's intrinsic,
Moral worth.
worth,
Yeah.
which I think
Yeah.
comes from God. And so, and I also think identity is, it's too simplistic to say that it's just related to race because there's a huge cultural factor as well. So, like you said, all the things that tie us together. I spent my senior year of college in Tanzania in East Africa and with a group of students, for example. And one of my friends in the program, who was an American student, came over with me, was a black woman who it's very obvious she and I have a lot more in common than she does with anyone in Tanzania. She is
Mm-hmm.
an American. She is an outsider there. In fact, in some ways, she was treated as more of an outsider than the white American students because there was this weird kind of expectation that she would speak Swahili or that she would, have certain cultural things in common,
Yeah.
which she didn't. So I don't think I bring up that anecdote just to say it's I think it's too simplistic to say yes, we humans, we creatures are tribal and identitarian, and that's always going to line up with ethnicity, which ethnicity is a factor. I agree, but it's not the only factor. We'd probably agree on that too, right?
Well, so the woke essentialized, I guess, is one common phrase. They essentialized identity into some sort of category and then applied their power structure dynamics, the intersectionality, the progressive stack to identities. So, and from that, we've seen reversals of fortune, demanding for reparations, basic moral
Yeah.
claims around that are based
Yeah.
solely on identity. What Hannah Nicole Jones of Pulitzer Prize winning 1619 fame, she said, there's racial black and then there's political black,
Right.
right? And when
Right.
you were bringing up your friend in Tanzania, that maps onto white liberals are more negatively biased towards white conservatives than anybody else, and so they share racial ethnicity, but the ideology stirs a lot of contention within that group. So there's more tension within the group than with outside of the group.
Yes, depending on how, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, but on how one defines liberal and conservative, absolutely. Because I get called a liberal a lot. I also get
Yeah.
called a conservative a lot. I also get called far right. I also get called a leftist. I mean, I get called all across the
Are you on the
spectrum.
Barbie right
So
or the anti-Barbie right?
I thought Barbie was a bitch in that movie.
Yeah, all she wanted was a vagina in the end. but she didn't want a penis to put in it,
I thought it
which
was
is weird.
definitely woke. I was on that side since we're going to relitigate the Barbie movie. I thought it was definitely woke message, but uh, yeah, I actually, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I think of my friends who I'm still friends with some people who are in the woke left ideology. Now it's very few because most of them it's very cult like ideology and they tend to throw you out and you're a heretic and they get rid of you.
Yeah.
There are a few tenuous and relationships that I still have with people in that world. The very few who are open to having conversation and listening, and those are the few. Those are the kinds that I think eventually you can help. That might break out of it because they're
Hmm.
even their willingness to talk to me, right? Well, so some of those people I know would call themselves liberals, but I don't think they're liberals by any classical sense. Like, I think they're very leftist. They hold on to these woke ideas that, like, that deep down, I know they don't believe, but they profess
Such
to
as what?
believe, like that men can become women, or that
Hmm.
that all white people have an implicit bias and racism, that you're internally racist towards other people, and that you have this privilege, and that you need to confess this white privilege, and a lot of the
Huh.
woke set of beliefs that I
The
don't.
woke classic. Because,
Right, woke classic.
yeah.
And so I wouldn't call those people. I don't think. In fact, the past 8 years, I've kind of been trying to talk to those kind of people with my show, which is like, you're not a liberal. You're no longer a liberal. Like, liberalism got eaten up by woke left, and you're in this very authoritarian, religious kind of dogmatic faith that is all about saying that your worth comes from your race or your sex, or it's all about, this is the way I
Hmm.
used to describe it to them. So we can start there. Maybe woke ideology I would describe to them as like, look at your belief system. Look at the things you claim to believe. Your belief system, my old belief system, says that the best way to look at the world is as a struggle or a competition for power among identity groups, and that the best way to reach this equality or equity is to redistribute power among identity groups. And then they they take every facet of identity and they create these labels of oppressor and oppressed. And so, within race, they say white people are the oppressors and black people and people of color are the oppressed, right? They say men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed. They say this new fake word they have, cis. Cis people are the oppressors and trans people are the oppressed. And they do this across every sphere of identity. And they say all these oppressed groups, we all have to work together to reach equality and to take power back from the oppressor groups. And that requires, I'm almost done with this. When I
No,
talk to
no,
them, I
I'm
say,
tracking.
but that requires you to judge and treat people differently on the basis of these identity characteristics. Like that requires you, if you're in the woke left, you are taught that, for example, men have all the societal power. You're looking at them as a collective. They don't look at Benjamin Boyce as an individual. They look at you as a straight white man. Oh my gosh, three oppressor groups. So you must be treated differently. Like, we have to take power away from you.
Hmm.
That's how it operates on an individual level, is it reduces you to these groups, to this
Yeah.
collective, and it's like, we have to treat you differently because you have power, so we get to tell you to shut up and sit down and listen to women, and we get to tell you to shut up. We get to point to your maleness and your whiteness, and we get to point to these identity characteristics as reasons why we're not going to listen to you,
Yeah.
or you shouldn't have a voice. And that's the way it operates. And so people in that world, a lot of them get into it thinking falsely, I think, that it's liberalism or that it's progressivism, or they think it's just a continuation of, like, this is just the way we reach it's not. It's on its face. It's not liberalism. It's racism. It is judging people by what sex they are, what race they are, whether or not they say that they were born in the wrong body, and it's treating them differently based on those things to try and they think the sincere ones who are in it, who really bought into it, they've been convinced that this is the way we end isms, is is to put everyone in these little groups and then and enact isms upon them and then
Yeah.
we'll get to this equality down the road.
So, what's the big deal with equality? Why is that so important?
For people in that world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the. I mean, one level. There's so many different ways to go deeper in this conversation, but one is to try to distinguish liberalism from woke progressivism.
Yes.
So liberalism has the ideals of individualism, equality under the law, which ends up always turning into blank slateism because it's really
Mm.
difficult to tell, these essential identities from this moral claim of everybody equal under the law, everyone equal under God. Because, to be frank, we're not God, and our
Right.
our our attempt at law is is steeped in humanity in our
Yes.
basic identities. So the ideal one thing that was bandied about a lot during the wars against woke classic was this: the liberals would say we want equality of what not equality of outcomes, but
Access,
equality of
opportunity, or access.
opportunity. Yeah, so if you look at the desire for equality of opportunity as opposed to outcome, then you have to redistribute wealth in order to provide everybody with the same beginning place. Everybody has to have the same education. Everybody has to have the same family structure, or at least we have to be aware that certain family structures provide better opportunities than others. But that goes against, like, the liberal wants to preach this
Then
opportunity without the opportunity cost.
well then that would make me by that definition, it would make me not a liberal. I guess because I don't believe that I don't believe in a you can't d- I believe in equality, I guess, under the law in terms of if there is some sort of law that says, for example, um, black people can't run for office or something, you get rid of that law. But I don't believe it is the government's job to come in and say, um, you, child, you were born into a house with fewer means than this child, and therefore you have less opportunity. So the government is going to forcibly do theft and take stuff from this family and give it to you. No, I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, that's
So,
busing. You're looking at busing. You're
right,
looking at the what happened after the Civil Rights Act was enacted.
right.
Was a whole program of the government. First, they suspended freedom of association in order to fix this racism problem. And this racism problem, if you look at it, people being denied services or being shuffled into different places based solely on their race is offensive to us now. And I don't think anybody wants to return to that. So the Civil Rights Act came and broke up that, Jim Crow laws and stuff.
Mhm.
But as soon as that was broken up, then they had to continually pursue the redistribution of wealth in order for Americans
Yeah.
to be equal.
And I absolutely disagree with the redistribution. It's you remove the impediment, but you don't redistribute. It's like like I mentioned Tanzania earlier. There's a
Mm.
very stark example in the history of that country. It's one of the few African countries that has not erupted into a civil war, but it could have because after Tanzanians gained independence and their first president, I believe he was their first president in the 60s, was President Nyeri. I learned about him because he passed away when I was living there, and there were huge funeral processions for weeks and stuff. And
Wow.
but there was a very big division among Tanzanians about him because what happened when they gained their independence was a lot of the wealthier families in Tanzania were Indian Tanzanians. And he instituted a policy called ujamaa, which means family, but but he called it, it was like African socialism. And what they did to the Indian people, like they took their homes, they gave them to other families, they forcibly removed families, Black Tanzanians and Indian Tanzanians, from my understanding, moved them to try and sort of like busing, but you're forcibly moved somewhere else to integrate everyone. There were like 136, I think that's the word that comes to mind, different languages. So in order to unite everyone, they made Swahili and then English the official languages that everybody would have to learn. But they forcibly moved people. They confiscated private property, and so the Indian Tanzanians, rightfully so, you've all these decades later, when he passed away, were very hostile. So depending on who you talk to, he was the greatest president ever who kept Tanzania from falling into civil war by instituting African socialism and trying, to force unity and
Hmm.
equality. Or he was the worst president ever because he separated families and seized property and took everything that some families owned.
Yeah.
And I line up more with that second view of what he did.
Yeah.
Is it true that well, they didn't have a civil war, but do I think it's morally right for a government to come in and seize things from people? No, I don't. Um,
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
So we probably agree on that point as well then. But I didn't mean to derail.
No.
You're saying liberalism views equality. They don't just want to remove impediments in the law that prevent access. They want to also implement equality of opportunity by like taking from some and giving to others.
I think real politics, I think liberalism as an ideal is very fancy and, an ideal that is really great to strive for. But the priors, like the assumptions of how it would operate in practice, rely on, as Madison was it said, like this Constitution is for a very specific moral people. And it worked best when that was homogenous. And over time, America kind of is different than all these other countries because we are a country that has successfully, iteratively invited in different cultures, starting with, it started with an Anglo, pretty much more or less Anglo Protestant Puritan culture, and then some Catholics were there in Maryland, and then we brought in like more and more waves of immigrants called white immigrants, like Europeans were invited over, and then there had to be a process of acculturation to that, and there was a black contingent there from the very beginning, which has its own parameters, and how that was, with slavery and stuff like that is a very big, I don't know, a moral, however you look at it, was that a moral good or not? It ended, it ended through a president, Abraham Lincoln, taking full power over the state and denying a lot of rights in order to effect this change in our culture where slavery was no longer existent, and that the states that wanted to pursue that or allow that were overtaken and subjugated to the northern states. Anyway, so we keep on bringing all these immigrants into it, and that strains our system because liberalism, we're trying to incorporate more and more ethnicities, more and more religions, more and more variations on religion, and it puts a lot of strain on the homogeny that could have a high trust, effective procedural liberalism that included a large amount of meritocracy or expertise that was cultivated based on merit. But even when you look at the meritocratic systems, they're always nepotistic in some way. You can't just purely say that my relationship to my father should be completely ignored and I should just be thrown out and lift myself up by bootstraps. So the woke are kind of correct in that there is this generational privilege or generational wealth that
Yes.
continually stacks up. And what do you do with that? What do you do if Harvard stopped discriminating based on race? It would be mostly comprised of Asian students, of white students, and the political elite class would have very few blacks in it if meritocracy based on SATs was the law of the land. And that, I don't know if you can have that will create a racial caste system if you just allowed meritocracy to flourish and allowed expertise to flourish. And so the woke right, which is a contradiction in terms, but maybe we should focus on that. They, if you go through your different things that you said, men can become women. Woke right are more honest, or the right wing is more honest about what a man and a woman is.
Oh, yes.
Men are more capable in this area and women more capable in that area. Men are generally more happier if they're fulfilling these societal functions, and women are more happy when they fulfill these societal functions. But
On average.
the
And I agree.
on average, but if you try to implement that, then you try to put women into a box and men into a box, and then here we are trying to engineer society. Or here we are trying to not engineer society, and we're watching the nature of human beings, which is tribal, which is sexist, which is racist, which is homophobic. Like all these things that the progressive liberal calls sin will emerge in a system that isn't being managed by a liberal moral program of continually teaching people to ignore certain natural inclinations that they have.
Yes. So I agree with a lot of the things you said there about like men and women are different. Actually, my husband and I were talking about this last night. We had date night at the Cracker Barrel. That's something woke right people do. I'm kidding. We were at the Barrel and date night at the Barrel. But no, we were talking at dinner there about how a lot of my opinions over about men and women, the things that we've known throughout most of human history that suddenly became controversial during the reign of woke left, or you might say during liberalism. I don't know, but certainly during the reign of woke left, they're not controversial. We know these things, and so, for example, I agree that women uh, are we self-report in surveys. Even we, on average, we enjoy working more with people and animals. Men self-report that they enjoy working more with things. Women are, biologically speaking, like we're intended to be nurturers. And you don't have to be a Christian to believe that, but I think it
Hmm.
aligns with Christianity as well, that that is our nature. So I think on average, like here's a controversial statement uh, that I know woke left people would shriek, in our modern society, but I on average I think men are better suited to be leaders. So that didn't used to be controversial. Now it suddenly is, but I think that's just an observation of our nature. Does that
Hmm.
mean that there are not outliers? No, of course. There are going to be some women, some outliers who are suited for it. But
Yeah.
where I depart from what I would call some of this sort of emerging,
Right.
more authoritarian
Identitarianism, authoritarianism.
identitarianism
Okay.
and
Yeah.
authoritarianism is they think some of them seem to think that we should then legally restrict women, that the way we fix this cultural rot and stuff is with the government saying, well, women can't work, or women can't run for office, or women can't do that. And I kind of view it the way I view the
Hmm.
woke left stuff, where they want the government to fix things, to be authoritarian. I, I think it's a cultural sickness and a spiritual rot. And so um, I don't think that's necessarily the government's role to do that.
Hmm.
I think combating it culturally is a different thing. And I see a lot of people combating it now.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people saying, a few years ago who may have been afraid to say, hey, on average, I think men are better suited to lead. They might have been afraid to say that. They're not afraid to say that as much anymore. Or, when I grew up, we're roughly, I don't want to age you. I think I might be older than you. We're roughly the same age.
Yeah. Probably. I can't see you
I can't
being
remember.
older than me. Yeah.
But when we grew up, there was a huge push from the feminist part of woke, like the sex, the gender part of woke. In the 90s, I think, is sort of when that started. And gratefully, it didn't start when in the 80s. It didn't start, I didn't have in my school, I didn't have all this like the future is female stuff, or like uh women can do science too, guys, like which I'm very glad I didn't have that, because I think it would have had the opposite effect. I would have started to be like, are we not smart? And I was
Yeah.
like, and I went to a science and math high school. I went to a pretty good university, and I don't know if I would have done all those things if I had had this constant barrage of like woke stuff that's like, girls can do math too. I'm like, do we need this encouragement? So
Hmm.
I missed all that. But one thing I did get, even early on, was this feminist push, the change that happened in society, where it's not just that we culturally shifted to where we're like, oh, women can work outside the home if they want to. No, 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 no. We went much further than that as a culture. We went to every parent works.
Yeah.
And we went to a place of, the woke left went to a place of denigrating motherhood and stay at home moms. And now it's like, I'm at, I think culturally we're shifting, because I can say,
Hmm.
I think the greatest callings in life, the greatest, uh, purpose you'll have as a woman is to be a wife and a mother, or as a man is to be a husband and a father. Like, those are greater than anything you're going to do career wise. And that used to, we not, during the woke years, if you said that, I mean, even now when I say that, I get attacked by some in the woke club.
Hmm.
So I agree with a lot culturally with what
Yeah.
some of these figures are saying. Like, can I lay out what I think? This is where we might disagree.
Yeah.
Do you see, remove the phrase woke right, because that, some people just disagree with that phrase on its face. But let me ask you, do you see a growing kind of racialism in the online right spaces? That's what Dave Smith called it. And Dave Smith said it, he sees it. He called it a racialism in
Yeah.
his discussion with Murray. And I think in his discussion with Tucker, he said he sees anti-Semitism growing. Do you see that happening at all online?
Um, I see that the taboo around it is being suspended. But if you look at any other group, they have a high in-group preference. It's the white people are kind of the exception. It was made a sign of status to transcend race, and a sign of status to deplore bigotry. And so any sort, and that's how the elite liberals painted themselves into a corner where they had to, where the whole Black Lives Matter, where you see like this complete performative raising up of black people and denigration of white people by a certain contingent of white people. It's all part of, it's a boutique belief. I think somebody called it that. I think his name is Henderson or somebody else. But what I see on Twitter since Elon bought it is a particular form of, kind of 4chan adjacent discourse that I don't know who came up with Juiceburg, but
Yeah.
yeah, have you
I
heard
just
that
learned the
one?
etymology of that word. It didn't even occur to me. It came from Asperger,
Yeah,
but about Jews.
Asperger's. Yeah, about juice,
Okay.
like where you see where people are constantly, oh, the Jews this, the Jews that, early history. It just is this pattern recognition thing of lumping all Jews into a particular tribe, which they do themselves. They're a highly internally coherent ethnicity that prizes certain values, and over the course of ages has, I think even genetically altered themselves to be very high in IQ, very high in industriousness, and very good at communications. And that's why they pop up in a lot of elite, banking. There's this funny thing that the wealthiest man in Jamaica is a Jew, and the fastest man in Israel is an African. Like there's just this thing that is genetic. And I think that a lot of the focus on Jews is very spurgy, and I also see a lot of defense of Jews by white Christians is really kind of just the same amount of spurginess. It's like we have to think about the Jews, we have to defend or attack the Jews all the time, over and over and over and over and over again. And since October 7th, and the current administration is kind of playing into this by hallowing anti-Semitism as a like as a sin of speech, where if you, I think they even tried to pass a bill where it's a
They
federal
did.
crime to
Which let
boycott
me go on the
Israel,
record. Yeah, I disagree with that.
right?
Absolutely. I don't agree with speech laws. So
That's
there are some
woke,
who
right? If
just
you want to say
that's
woke, right?
I don't agree
Right.
with speech laws. Again, I don't think it's the government's job
Yeah.
to do that. To say you can't say this thing whether I agree with the thing or not.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with a lot of this. I think it's filthy. The stuff I get in my comments nowadays, Benjamin, just so everyone's aware of what we're talking about, the kind of stuff I get in my comments is like every day. It's what you would call the Juiceburging. You're a Jew. I'm
Yeah.
not, but okay. You suck, Jewish, COCK. Okay. There's a lot more vulgar stuff than that.
Yeah.
And then I also get, uh, it's similar to the woke because the woke will say, you're a man, therefore you don't get to have an opinion. Like they'll pick, and it's not really about identity, but identity's like the cloak. Identity's the cloak for this kind of
Hmm.
Marxist stuff. But they will say you're a man, therefore you need to shut up, or you're white, you need to shut up. Check your privilege. What I'm getting this now on the from some who claim to be on the right, where they're like, "You're a woman, let me speak to your husband. I won't talk to women."
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, it's sort of similar. They're like, you don't get to have an opinion
Hmm.
because you're not this
So it's
sex or this
identitarian
race.
authoritarianism based on nature rather than based on inverting nature or based on
Is this?
history.
Wait a minute. This sounds very similar to sinning in the right direction.
Maybe
Kidding.
it is. I mean, because
I
like if you say men can't become women, the opposite of that is men are men and women are women, and there are certain cultural patterns that we will enforce either softly or more directly based on the differences rather than based on eradicating the differences. White
okay.
people have, or Europe had conquered the world through technology and industriousness. Therefore, they deserve to rule the world because they proved themselves worthy of ruling the world. Where that would be on the right, and on the left would say, no, they stole everything. They need to be cleansed ethnically through a program of mass immigration. They need to be dethroned from all power centers, and the opposite should be affected. So one is going in the direction of history, and to claim identitarian authoritarianism, and the other one's trying to correct history using uh, authoritarian identitarianism. Not going to take
Except
off.
for some of these figures are now arguing. I've had a guy who was very sincere in my comments who did speak to me. He's sort of like the woke, like occasionally you'll get a woke left person, like I mentioned earlier, who will not shut down the lines of communication. And
Hmm.
occasionally I will get a woke, what I would term a woke right person, put that in quotes for people who don't like it, who will talk to me. And this one guy very, very passionately was going back and forth with me about why he believes in reparations for white people. Although he was saying heritage Americans, but he was saying we need to correct the racism of the past. It was the same arguments
Hmm.
that I hear from the woke left. It was like the government needs to redistribute things because white people have had our heritage stolen from us. And I'm like, for me, fundamentally, I left woke because I disagreed with the idea that the best way to interact with people in the world is to judge them based on what different identity groups they're in and treat them differently because of that.
Hmm.
And and I disagree. I also so that is what kind of loosely I mean by identitarianism. But I also disagreed with the idea that it's the government's job to come in and take things from one group of people and give it to others or institute laws that favor one identity group over others. I completely disagree with these laws. Like you mentioned
Hmm.
Harvard. They should get rid of the race-based administrations and the sex-based administration admissions. Sorry, admissions. They should get rid of race-based admissions and sex-based admissions. They should. It should be meritocracy. And if that ends up looking mostly Asian and white, that's the way it ends up looking. You're still going to have outliers. There's still going to be women who get accepted, exceptional. There's still going to be black people who attend. There's still going to, and here's the benefit. You have the benefit of knowing that you made it there on your own merit. I've heard from so many people who are in these so-called oppressed groups that the left treats differently, who are like, you know, it sucks because
Mm.
you want to know that you got there on your own merit, and sometimes you do know that and other times you're not sure, but it's like you want to know that you accomplished that. You don't want to be denied anything because of your race, or given anything because of your race, or denied something because of your sex, or given something because of your sex. So it's like, get rid of those. I disagree with government intervention like that.
Hmm.
So because of that, because that's why I left the woke, right? So when I see this thing, whatever you want to call it, kind of emerging on the right, I see figures like, let's take a couple of examples.
Okay.
Here's the weird thing online. They're always like, name names, name names. And then you're like, well, I kind of don't want to, because I don't want to make it about any one person. Like, you better, well, you don't have any names. I'm like, okay, let's name a name. And then they're like, oh, you're making an enemies list. Like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But let
Yeah.
me name one who I have named, Andrew Tate. Okay. Andrew Tate, I
Or
understand,
Fuentes, Tate and
or
Fuentes.
Fuentes.
Yeah.
Okay, these are two examples that are public figures we can look at. Okay, in the case of Tate, I understand why he is appealing to disaffected young men, because he is saying, I rebuke all of leftist woke identity, feminism, all this stuff that says you're worthless, right? And he is saying some true things. He is. And some young men are drawn to him because of that. But mixed in with the true things, like in my opinion, with any con artist, with any grifter, with anyone who's selling some poison mixed in with the truth, that he's got poison mixed in there. So he is attacking the traditional family, the biblical marriage, biblical patriarchy. He's attacking God's order just as much as the woke left does. He's not saying create strong families. He's saying have as many babies with as many women as possible. Like, make a bunch of single moms, and like
Yeah, yeah,
he's
he's going
going
full in
after.
on the evolutionary strategy, like a full human nature. So he's sending in the right direction. He's sending
That's
according to
what
nature.
one of these pastors, who I consider to be woke right and a false shepherd, just my opinion. That's what some of them have said. Well, he's sinning, but he's sinning in the right direction. I'm like, there's no such thing in the Bible. You are sinning or not. And like,
Hmm.
he is promoting degeneracy. He is promoting hedonism, and also a resentment that's very much like the resentment on the left. Like, a lot of the people who defend him to me, they remind me, I can't help it, they remind me of feminists, because feminists are always telling me, oh, it's all men's fault, men need to shut up, and men need to sit down, and men have privilege, and men are the root of all evil. And then I got these guys telling me, oh, it's all women's fault, it's women need to
Yeah.
shut up and women need to sit down. And I'm like, you guys are like mirror reflections of each other, because
Yeah.
you know what, like when my husband and I were talking about this last night, how did we get here culturally? Like, we were talking about men are more suited on average to lead. How did this happen? Well, it's a breakdown of both roles, in my opinion. You've got the my husband had just listened to a Jordan Peterson conversation. I think it was the one with Rogan, and we were talking about that. And he was saying, how he talked about the Garden of Eden, and how a lot of women are more susceptible to false ideology. I think we are. I think the Bible even talks about that in Timothy. It talks about, in the end days you will have women, silly women who follow these false shepherds and prophets and stuff like that. Women in the story in the Garden of Eden, Eve is the one who's susceptible to the poisonous snake. She's the one that listens to him. But then her husband follows,
Yep.
and he's like, because he wants to get laid. Okay, that's a simplification, but sometimes the man will follow, and both both of them sinned, both fell. And so if you look at in society what's happened, women who have taken on more of this leadership role, and men who've abdicated and let them and followed them in some cases into this woke ideology that's almost destroyed our country, right? And so it's a failure of both. And I think we we burn it all down if we just, instead of correcting that,
Yeah.
we go fully over into this kind of like, oh well, it's not that men are the root of all evil, it's that women are. Okay, great. Now we get to spend how many
Yeah, you just
decades
replaced the patriarchy with the longhouse.
there? Yeah, with the longhouse, the gynocracy or whatever. Like, okay, now we're still gonna miss the essential truth, which is, as a Christian, I view we are all fallen, and your salvation is, it's an individual choice whether or not you're going to allow, like, you're going to open your heart and your mind to God. And here's where we are. 2 days ago, the woke, what's being called woke right, the infiltration into the Christian spaces is becoming pretty pronounced. So
Hmm.
much so that we have a very popular now Christian podcast, supposedly Christian podcast, called Stone Choir. And I listen to those guys to try and understand them. They are very intelligent. They speak a lot of truth, a lot of truth. They talk about the denigration of men. They talk about what makes a strong man. They have some very good episodes, but mixed in, you got a bit of that poison. You got a bit of that poison, such that one of the hosts of that podcast just did a debate 2 nights ago. I was just listening to it, where he's arguing that black people, on Twitter, he says this: black people are not American, and not just that they'll never be American, but they're not human. And then in his
Hmm.
debate 2 nights ago, black people cannot be sanctified like white people can. This, and he's arguing this from a supposedly Christian perspective. Well, that
Hmm.
goes against all of the gospel's teachings, which is that, um, there is no, in Christ, there is no Jew nor Gentile. God came to change the hearts of all people, of all men. Like, it's, so we're at this place now where
Hmm.
I never thought we would have to see a debate about that, but there's a debate about it now, and it's
Well, is that
seductive, I think.
that fabled overcorrection? Christ didn't. Did Christ come to abolish all ethnic differences, to abolish all cultures, or to unify all cultures into one unified, like homogenous culture? There are aspects of the Christian doctrine that directly feed into globalism. Like certain values have been kind of twisted around, commodified, commercialized, liberalized, conservatized. Like neocons and neoliberals are kind of they're descendants from a strand of Christianity, Christian thought, where we're all the same, and are there's really no difference between us culturally. That's too far. I don't
I
think
agree.
Christ came to eradicate the Romans and the Galatians and all the different like towns. They all had like the Greeks and the Jews. He says he didn't want to abolish Greekness and Jewishness. I don't think Paul was aiming at that, but to open the doorway for communion across that difference, right?
Yes,
And
I agree.
so that is, I think, part of the problem. Ultimately, is that most people, to quote that cult leader, the people are retarded. The people the
Wait, who's
people will
that?
take they will take the idea of a longhouse and turn it into, like women don't belong in power, and when women control the world, there's this all these problems. There's certain aspects of feminist theory that we're discussing in a lot of nuance, what the patriarchy is, trying to point it out, trying to see it. They wanted to dismantle it, and I don't think they really want to take accountability for what happens when you dismantle that thing called patriarchy. There's aspects of the intellectual right that have a very nuanced take about what the longhouse actually means. And that's why, and you can see why advertising is like this, why Disney is making these total flops over and over and over again, why gynocracy, why the force is female now. Like what are, that's actually a material. You can see what happens when women get in control of these institutions, or when men bow to women's preferences in these institutions. It creates a certain direction. Now, whether that direction's bad or good is open to debate. I think the quality has really dropped off with the woke. Maybe there could be a female Michelangelo, but Camille Paglia would say you don't have a female Mozart the same reason you don't have a female Jack the Ripper. Like, men are going to be on these distributive tail ends.
Yeah.
But men divorced from their purpose of being what you call fathers and husbands, what are they? It's like a warrior chief, or it's like an Andrew Tate. It's a warrior chief. Like, it's not, if you bend your identity towards serving other identities, then that identity actually is redeemed of its difference and its distinction, its preference for itself. It's kind of homosexuality in a way, where my masculinity is what I have sex with, not the women. Like, I'm having sex with my own masculinity by like letting it be that which is like constantly going and treating women as fleshlights or whatever like that. That was
Wait a minute.
stretch, I know.
Wait, that last part you lost me. You said if your identity is serving other identities, that part. What were you trying to say there?
When when my when my manhood is used in the service of my wife's womanhood, then it is redeemed. It is made. It is made. It serves the order that God established. It serves the natural order. It serves the divine order, and I can feel in the process of not submitting myself to my wife's wishes, but meeting my wife with my manliness and giving my manliness to her, serving her, taking out the trash, right? Listening to her, doing things for her, using my masculinity in service to the family. My masculinity is redeemed. Whereas a Tate is very, very homosexual, and I'm sorry, any homosexuals that tune in. I love my gay friends, right? But Tate is very, Tate is a, I don't want to say the bad word. Tate is very gay because he worships his own masculinity. When he's having sex with a woman, he's having sex with himself as a man. Having sex.
We can agree on this. I think so. I think he probably is the type that has mirrors everywhere, sitting looking at himself.
Yeah. Patrick Bateman kind of guy.
Yeah. Yeah. He also, have you noticed? Well, we may or may not agree on this. I saw a video of his. Actually, my friend Brahma Bull pointed this out. Who's on a Christian panel with me sometimes.
Brahma Bull.
Brahma Bull. Do you know him?
No.
Brahma Bull. Anyway, we did a show where he was pointing out that Tate has done these videos where he's talking to the camera and he's talking to kids the way that Jeffrey Marsh does on the left. And there's one video I watched of his where he's talking to dads, presumably, and he's like, "This is why your sons listen to me and worship me, and listen to what I say, because you're a loser." And it's like, I got connection with your kids and you don't. I'm like, whoa, you sound like a groom. You sound like Jeffrey Marsh, like a groomer. Hey, kids. Yeah, like, hey, kids, are your parents in the room? Let's talk. Ew. But we might agree on that. That's interesting what you're saying about, if your masculinity is divorced from its function or what I might call like it's God's role for you as a man, like then you just become kind of idolatrous of that. And there's always
the threat of it. I mean, you can try. This is really dangerous territory, but if you expand the identity to, let's say, Britishness, Britain had a certain amount of pride in itself, and that pride in itself allowed it to create a country upon which the world never set. They expanded over the globe, and they, in their own pride for their own values and their own ethnos, were able to organize countries like China, countries like India. Were able to go and conquer them and extract resources and in exchange organize them. But in the process of World War II, that entire empire has broken up and was subsumed into the global American empire. And now you see them struggling very profoundly with what they are. And they're being overwhelmed by immigrants. They're being colonized, but not colonized by a ruling force, actually rather colonized by the people that they had previously ruled. Their own rulership doesn't care about them anymore. There's no salvation for Britain until it regains a sense of national worth and national pride. And part of that is really ethnic. And now, how do you go and center your ethnicity as a British person without stirring up a race war, without abolishing people who are not your kind from your island? And what does that actually look like? I don't know if that's possible and if it's good were that to happen, but I don't think there's any other future for Britain other than just a globalist hub, just another economic zone, unless they go back to something prior to that, which would be around their ethnicity and their pride in their own selves.
Yes. Well, you're making me think of, I want to grab this book. There's this book. So I'm reading this now. It's by R.R. Reno. Have you heard of this book? It's called The Return of the Strong Gods.
Yeah. No, I've
Popular
heard it
by
bandied about, and you see
nationalism.
that happening a lot with
Okay, so this
Trump's
book,
bluster.
I would be so interested to hear what you think of it. We're going to read it for Deprogrammed Book Club. My pastor recommended I read it. So this guy, R.R. Reno, this book is actually a lot of the people that I consider to be pushing woke right stuff. Well, they will refer to this book and they will say a lot of them got the phrase post-war consensus from this book, for example. But if you listen to interviews with R.R. Reno, the author of this book, he explicitly says, like, ethno-nationalism is just as idolatrous as the globalism and open borders. He's not pushing this sort of fascism is just as idolatrous, and he's not pushing that. What he meant by post-war consensus appears to be very different than the way these guys are now using that phrase. So I see a lot of these guys that are getting called woke right using that phrase to mean, oh, Churchill was the real villain and Hitler was just trying to protect his people, like this complete reimagining of history and of world events. That is not what R.R. Reno, that's not how he used the phrase. Post-war consensus in this book, which so far, what I've read of it, I completely agree with, he's using it to say after World War II, there was this push to embrace globalism and open borders and to destroy any of the quote unquote strong gods of national pride, identity, like national identity, and to prevent another Hitler or something like that from happening. How can we do that? They just went way over into this extreme of, completely opening the walls and let everyone in, and this kind of woke place that we've been in for decades. And so he's arguing against that. He's arguing against, for sure,
Well,
against
what is he
globalism,
arguing for?
strong borders. But I'm not. I just started reading it. Maybe we
Yeah.
could read
Well,
together. I'm
what's a strong border? I mean, a strong
well,
border would be around a people. That's blood and
yes.
soil.
Well, around a people, but uh, do you mean by that you would take ethnicity into account when in the
How would you
immigration
not?
process?
How would you not? Like the furthest thing from biological ethnicity you could possibly go with internal coherence would be a language. That's probably the furthest you could go.
I think it. Do you think it depends on the country? So, for example, Germany, which my husband and I visit pretty much every year, very different from the United States, both in terms of size and heritage. These people, a lot of these people want to talk about heritage Americans. Germany has been inundated with people from other countries and cultures to such a degree that there are parts of Germany where you don't even realize you're in Germany. Uh, it's no longer functionally. It's no longer Germany.
Same with
Parts of it.
London. I was just in London.
Yes.
It's just like, boy,
Yeah.
this is like anywhere else. It's like literally just Chicago with a different
And
accent. There's nothing
and
different
that's
about it.
not. I would say that the United States. Do you think there are some differences here with our history and our founding and our history of immigration? And I would say we are one of the few so-called melting pot countries where we have integrated different, certainly different European ethnicities,
Yeah.
um, Latino populations who were here before. In Texas, it's a lot of Latino heritage here. And then with our history of slavery, bringing in Black ethnicities, like we are more of that. And because of our large size,
Yeah.
also, we're very different from a place like Germany. So I think the immigration laws would need to be different depending on a number of factors, including size, like geography and
Hmm.
history and all of that.
Yeah. But in order for Europe to protect itself, it has to have a strong European identity, and that is ethnic. And in the
I,
very least,
I
it's
do
language
agree.
based. The very
At the very
least.
least, language based, I agree.
And without a religious structure that facilitates, like we were saying with Paul, like opening up a realm or an area by which the Jew and the Greek can humanize each other rather than box each other in, like this extra realm, which is a metaphysical, transcendental, Christian coded ability to see the content of somebody's character, right? Somebody's moral worth. That is a religious thing. Without that, then it would have to be very selfish, right? It would have to be, Germany and France returning to some sort of national contention, even if it's joking. And they do compete economically. I'm kind of getting lost in my own weeds here, but
No, that's okay. We
for
both
for
have been.
for Europe to return to its former glory, it has to have particularity. How do you have that particularity? How do you go from where it is now with the bureaucratic proceduralism of the EU, which is a bunch of unelected officials telling everybody what to do? How do you go from that back to a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, when in Germany specifically, the party that is explicitly for the people, by the people, and of the people is being labeled by the ruling class as unacceptable, as
You
basically
talking about the
fascist or
AFD?
whatever. Yeah, right? The
Yeah,
FD, right?
yeah.
Whereas in America, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people is always going to be a particular culture using government to promote its own values. Now, those values can be more woke or less woke, tighter or looser, and we try to do a loosey-goosey thing, but inevitably a government of the people, by the people, and for the people will be of and by and for the people who control that. And they will create a feedback loop to support themselves and rule either graciously or ungraciously those who are different than them. And
Hmm.
then that's where you have like payoffs, and that's where you look at things demographically. There's racial salience in America when after every election they break down who voted for who based on ethnicity. The blacks did this, the Latinos did that, the whites did this, the educated and the uneducated whites, right? So we all see that these identity groups are real and they have a different pattern to them.
Yes, but don't you think that a lot of that has been there's been this grip on, I would say, again, sorry to use spiritual terms, but like
No, you don't have to apologize to me.
principalities, like
Yeah.
dark forces, like they're they're evil
Hmm.
actors in the world, um, who play upon these divisions to keep us warring and divided. And the woke left like cornered
Hmm.
the market on this for so long when it came to what they called the oppressed identity groups. Like, we work for you, and why wouldn't you be if you were an unscrupulous person? Like a lot, like a lot of people, a lot of the I think more sociopathic people who are in the woke left who take advantage of this woke left ideology to for their own ends,
Hmm.
sometimes are women or black people who are using it to their advantage because you're in this belief system that says you get to have the voice, you get to speak, you're a uniquely oppressed identity. And so they really cornered the market on that. But isn't it interesting though that we've this whole group of people of varied beliefs and backgrounds, like a coalition of people, have been fighting back against woke ideology to such a degree that I think we have made some cultural wins, and and I think that woke is losing its grip on these so-called oppressed identity groups. And I see that somewhat reflected in politics, because you mentioned the voter identity, like they break down the groups. Trump made huge gains
Hmm.
among Black Americans. Each time he ran, he got a higher percentage of the Black vote. Leftists were shrieking and pulling their hair out because here in Texas, the most Latino county in the whole state went like, what was it? Like 90 something percent for Trump.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like they were like, it's not working anymore. The
Yeah.
the he Trump made huge gains among people who consider themselves, gay. Is that like that's an identity marker? He made huge gains um, among gay people, among Black people, among women, and so I think that identity Marxism on the left is losing its grip. And we all know, anecdotally, we all know people who are in these groups who've rejected woke left, who've decided, I'm not going to be unscrupulous and just push this because it benefits me because I'm in these identity groups. I'm going to speak against it. Like in the Christian space, for example, Samuel Say, it's a great example, who speaks about Christ's redemption for all humans. He doesn't fall in with woke left ideologies just because he's Black. He speaks against it. He speaks against this whole like you should judge and treat people differently on the color of their skin. And
Hmm.
there's countless people who've rejected it, I guess is what I'm saying. And I thought we were tilting towards rejecting it. And I was like, I viewed Trump's win as like a political consequence of culturally people starting to reject woke.
Hmm.
And so what I see with this whole woke right debate is I'm having people tell me this. Some of them are anons, maybe they're bots, who knows? Maybe they're paid, I don't know. But some of them have big accounts and they are saying stuff to me like, well, Black people are racist, so white people have to become racist. We have to. Or they're saying things like Black people will always be identitarian, so white people have to become identity. We have to do this. And on a very fundamental level, I don't think that you cure a sickness with more of the sickness. I don't think that you cure woke left with like identitarianism, authoritarianism. I don't think you cure it with more of the same. I don't think that you become the monster you fight to beat the monster. Like, and so what about all
Hmm.
those examples of people who didn't fall into woke left? What about all the people who were leaving it? Is there no accounting for those population shifts in the past 15 years or so? People who've been rejecting it, who against all odds, even though they're told Trump hates you, MAGA hates you, conservatives hate you. Conservatives are all Nazis and they're all crazy racists and they're all sexist and they hate and they're homophobic and they're all this and that. But there were growing numbers of people. There are growing numbers of people in those identity groups who are being told that, who are like, nah, I don't think so. I'm going to vote for Trump anyway.
Hmm.
Like, I don't think so. So I think we can defeat that kind of hatred in the heart
Hmm.
for others. I
Hatred
do
in the
view
heart.
it as
Yeah.
a hatred in the heart. Not all of it. I'm not saying. I think some of it is. I definitely see some of the hateful parts of it because I get it in my comments, and
Yeah.
it's resentment based, a lot of it. And I understand why the resentment's there. And look, my husband and I were saying this last night. We all have an Adam nature. We're all fallen, as I said. Even if you're saved, you still sin, and you're still human, and you still struggle. Uh, he was sort of saying, like once in a while when you see something happen that you're like, um, that's like revenge based, not justice based, but revenge based culturally, where you're like, yeah,
Hmm.
get them, stick it to them. They deserve it. And there's that human part of us, of our heart, that's like, I know it. I understand it because I have felt it where it's like, yeah, stick it to him. But I have to pray about that when I feel that and recognize, to me, that's the serpent whispering in my ear. It's very seductive. It's like, don't they deserve the revenge, right? I'm like, no, I believe in earthly justice, but revenge is different. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord.
Hmm.
I don't want to give in to any seductive darkness that's telling me like um to return hatred with hatred, or to return brutalism with brutalism, or to return discrimination with discrimination. Or I don't think it solves itself that way. I don't know if I'm making sense. I might
No,
be.
you are. It's so with the popularization of this
Yeah.
term called woke right. It's being used to describe sociopaths that are right coded. It's also being used to link anti Semites with isolationists and American First people. It's being used to link post and pre liberal thinkers on the right, the intellectual right, with the deplorables, and just to completely allow classical liberals to say everything that doesn't abide by our Overton window is extremism. Every idea promulgated by anybody outside of like this very cherry picked classical liberal heritage is out of the realm of acceptable discourse. And I don't truck with that. I don't. So if we are talking specifically about the phenomena of resentment, of hatred, and that is one particular conversation, and then that is a conversation around evil. Like that is the problem with evil, and your terminology jives with me because I grew up Christian. I'm a sinner, I'm fallen. I have to be very careful when I feel these things because I know that they're going to make me more and more narrow. My resentment will propound upon itself, go out in the world, and then cause more resentment to come back to me. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's a smart game theory.
Yeah.
But there's these questions. Me and my wife have a hard time like figuring out how to even talk about this. Like there's ethnic differences that do come across in IQ metrics that then do lead to different ways of living life that then do amass more wealth to each other and over generations cause more and more differences in wealth to appear. And then in those differences that appear and stabilize, there's tension between those things. And it is a wise ruler that will figure out how to decrease those tensions by doing some form of redistribution, some form of you can say this is class based, not race based. We're just going to have a tax system that taxes the wealthy and pads up the poor in order for them to not have like this huge disparity between the rich and the poor. Like trying to mitigate that a little bit. But the term woke right is used in just terribly injudiciously. If you look at the way it's used, a lot of people are not allowed to criticize the state of Israel, to not question why it called itself Israel, and how powerful a term that would be in the imagination of Christians if they didn't call themselves Judea, they called themselves Israel. That is a spiritual claim on the heart of Christians, and no wonder Christians their loyalties can now be split between their country, America, and this other foreign country, Israel, because Israel is somehow considered to be, and Jordan Peterson says this, Douglas Murray say this, and I just don't know what to do with this because I know like any criticism codes me with the anti-Semites, but they say that if Israel falls, so does the rest of the West. Like why does my Christendom rely on this foreign nation? Why can I not look into it? Why does the post-war consensus, the myth around Western imperialism, defeating the Nazis and giving half of Europe to Stalin to absolutely murder and rape millions of people under the name of communism, that was an acceptable price that we paid to defeat Germany. And now any sort of nationalism is fascism, and any sort of communism, no matter how brutal, is something that we can give a pass to.
Well,
That post-war liberal consensus needs to be questioned. World War II is I don't know what Daryl Cooper believes or thinks. I've spoken with him. I know he gets a terrible bad rap. He's it's not a revisionist history. He's telling a human stories that is incredibly messy. He's actually a bleeding heart liberal if you actually listen to him. He is appalled by any sort of murder and death affected by an ideology, wherever it comes from. And so his reevaluation of World War II, if you entertain that, it allows us to kind of not claim ourselves as the saviors of the world, which puts ourselves in the position of trying to save the whole world and puts us in the position of a global superpower, but in the position of people who had short-term decisions to make and did really messy decisions that caused a lot of pain and suffering because we thought it was the lesser of two evils, but it's still evil. And so we can't just claim the mantle of righteousness in terms of war. I feel like I'm a little out of the weeds, so help me center
No,
myself.
well, there's a couple things I wrote down because there was a lot there.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think that any kind of nationalism is fascism, and in fact, I think what is happening right now is with among some who I do consider it's agreed that we disagree on this, but the some who I consider to be woke right are actually trying to blend that. And to me, it appears kind of like on the left when the woke left is like, we're all liberals here. Like, I think they tried to convince liberals that this is liberalism. And I think there's a lot of woke, what I call woke right people, some of these people who actively say they are fascists or they believe in tyranny, who say, some of them openly say they are not conservatives, but others, I think, are kind of trying to be like, yes, nationalists, yes, it's true, you must be a fascist if you're a nationalist. Like, they kind of go along with what woke left says. Like, woke left is like, all nationalists are fascists, and the woke
Yeah.
right is like, yes, we are, yes, come into our camp, right? Like, we are all the same. And
That is
I don't
such an interesting phenomenon because it is sarcastic, it is devilish, it is satanic in a little way because it's teasing and stuff like that. I mean, I did a parody of the Kanye song, and I knew that if I did that, like it would sound like I'm actually like for it, but I'm describing the conditions under which somebody would say, yeah, inward HH. Like under certain conditions, people will say that even just to balk the system that's oppressing them, even to say, okay, listen, you guys, you are literally oppressing me based on my race, and you're diluting my country, you're diluting my currency, I'm taking it up the butt, and the one thing that I can't be is a fascist. That's my only option. So sure, I'm a fascist. If you call me, yeah, fine, call me that.
yes, and this is a phenomenon that I've been many people were worried about for a long time. I think maybe yourself included that like that part of what the woke left does is they call everyone a fascist and a Nazi and all these things to where the word has no meaning anymore
Yeah.
almost, and then people are like, okay, I guess I am, and I'm going to be called that anyway, so this becomes more appealing. Or it's like they call everyone everyone on the right is a racist, which is not true. But then there are some people in this fringe element I've seen who are like, yes, we are racists. Yes, come, it's true. It's almost like they're standing up and saying, yes, we will be the boogeyman. We will be the stereotype that the left has said exists, and come over here and be boogeyman with us. That's how I view it.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, I don't, being a nationalist doesn't make you a fascist. No. As far as the Israel stuff, I hear this a lot from people who argue with me. Um, I don't think criticizing Israel has anything to do with woke right. Like, I don't. For me, I don't. First of all, I don't think we should be funding that war. That's really the only opinion I've ever offered about it, because I don't talk about Israel. I don't know enough about it. I don't. I'm more concerned with cultural issues like woke ideology,
Hmm.
and so I'm more focused on that. And then I have my husband and I are renovating a house. Like, you have limited time. I'm not saying I don't care about the war. It's not, for me, it's not an all-consuming topic. And so
Yeah.
I never I never talk about it, but they'll say, "Oh, you're just using the phrase woke right because you're a Zionist," which I'm like, well, I don't even know what that means, but okay, whatever. And then they'll say, or you don't want people to criticize Israel. I'm like, no, criticize Israel
Yeah.
all you want. Go right
Yeah.
ahead. Right
Yeah.
ahead. So I can't speak for those people
Yeah.
who
I
do
think
that. And
arguing
when I heard you
online is just a
say,
lost endeavor. It's just like,
it is,
because everybody's just throwing all this stuff and assuming that you think all these things because you did one thing, you're on this side. And it's just like, this is just so low
yes.
resolution.
And so So when it's so low resolution, so I try to get very specific, and I'm so happy you want to talk about this person to person that you said yes, because it's like, I respect you, and there are certain things that people will do to each other online when they don't know each other and they're anonymous and they're online, that I would not do that to you, and I know you wouldn't do it to me. So I think this is where people can talk with each other instead of past each other.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to evade some of the things you said. You said Murray and Peterson have said that if Israel falls, all of the West falls.
Yeah.
Well, first of all,
They've
I
pinned a
haven't
lot
heard
on that.
I haven't heard them say that, but I trust you that they did say that, and I don't agree with that or even really know why. Again, I don't read a lot about Israel. I haven't had time. It's kind of like climate change. I'm like, okay, one day I'm going to do a deep dive and figure out what I think. But I'm I've got a garden. I've got other things I'm doing first. So if they said that on its face without any context, and without, I would say no, I don't agree with that. But I can't. I'm not those guys, so I
Yeah.
can't defend what they have said. I'm
Well,
just
it's
here
just
saying
it's
that
interesting.
when,
So the woke right, so called, are the
yeah,
people that pointing out that Israel as a lobby has a tremendous amount of power over the United States governments, over the universities.
I think it does.
Yeah, anti-Semitism is a particular form of racism. It's a superior form of racism. No, it's not. It's all. It's either.
It's all racism,
It's all racism. So
just like racism against white people.
yeah. So
Yeah,
Israel has carved out a special place for itself on the right via neoconism as a special case based on ethnicity. And the really interesting thing, a lot of people that you would call woke right basically just want to have their own Israel. They just want Germany to be Germany, Israel to be Israel, and France to be France, and Texas to be Texas, and my land to be my land, just and not have any invaders, and kind of have a ethnically homogenous life to a greater or lesser extent. And I don't know how far you bring that ethnicity, how at what point you tighten the ethnicity too far, but I know you can loosen it up too far. And so we're playing with this dial. Do we tighten this thing on identity, or do we loosen this thing on identity? Because it's unraveling. It doesn't work when it's unraveling. And we're really scared of raveling it. And I think a lot of liberals they're still living with the specter of Hitler in their head and saying any sort of raveling or bonding around ethnicity is going to go too far. It's already going too far if you're doing that. And I don't think so, but I do think that
so.
anything that's hateful it's low brow, and it doesn't need to, that's not leadership. If you brought up Trump, why is Trump unifying us? Like, what is the magical mystery of that man? He's a comedian. He kind of has, I wouldn't say he's not without some sort of divine blessing, especially because he got shot in the head.
Yes.
Right. So there's something going on there. But he's a flawed human being. He's a sexual libertine. He's not a representative Christian of Christianity
No.
by any means, but there's something
There's something
inspired.
there.
There's something
Yes.
there.
He stood up and said, "Fight, fight, fight."
Yeah.
After they shot him in the head.
They shot him in the head.
That At that point I was like,
If you're not getting
I
tingles, I mean, maybe I'm in a cult, but maybe I'm not. And I'm seeing something, maybe I'm seeing something happen that is unlike anything else.
you
One
know that
thing that,
real quick. Okay, go ahead.
no,
But you
go.
know that verse, that Bible verse about God uses the foolish to shame the proud. Do you know that verse I'm talking about? It's like God uses the weak to shame the strong. God uses. I used to wonder about that verse a long time. Like, what does that mean? And I think when I think of Trump, sometimes I think of that because it's sort of like I know this is just really quick in
No,
the
no,
movie
no.
Amadeus. In the movie Amadeus, the way that Mozart is portrayed in that movie is as this bumbling, foppish fool. He's just a fool, but he's being used by God. And
Yeah.
actually, Salieri, the way Salieri is represented in that movie, he's so envious and resentful of Mozart, and he's like, "But Mozart is this fool, and he plays with the voice of God, like God is speaking to him through his music. Why did God bless him? He's a fool, you know. I'm the strict." legalistic Christian who makes deals with God, that if he gives me that talent, I'll do it the right way. It
Yeah.
reminds me of people who are like, I'll do communism the right way. Like I would, if you gave it to me, I would
Yeah.
wield the ring. I would wield the ring the right way, right? Okay,
Yeah.
that is kind of how I think of Trump, because I do think God chose him for a reason. He chooses all of us. He chooses people for different reasons. He can use anyone. He can use a non-believer even. I think Trump, because he's so funny and he's so, like you said, he's part comedian, he's part troll, he's part like figure and all this. It shames the proud. Think of how proud and haughty the left elitists
Hillary
are.
Clinton embodied it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so God's like, look at how Trump shames them. This guy who's kind of this joke, it ends up being this instrument for good. I think he's an instrument for good. At least right now, I think that. I
Yeah.
think he has been. And gosh, how it shames the proud and the strong and the powerful that he was elected not once
Yeah.
but twice, and that he's so
What
popular.
are you skipping
Anyway.
2020 in your count?
Oh yeah, well yeah.
Sorry. There's a
That's
third
true,
rail. I
dude.
always have to touch it.
Yeah.
I think what's really missing, one thing that's really missing in the analysis that is including woke right into trying to literally gatekeep the right, especially from the left me liberals coming over to the right. They found a big audience. They were fighting with the right against the woke. And then as soon as the woke started to lose traction, they started to rearrange the furniture in the right side of the aisle. And woke right is a particular tool to control discourse. It's explicitly a political bludgeon to control discourse. Now, it might describe phenomena that based on resentment or trying to like, what is this bigotry? Like that, like, what is that? What is that hate? Why is that popping up? Why is even in Christianity, they're starting to make these racialist terms? What is this racism going on? It doesn't mirror woke. It's just going in the different direction. Now, but it's never contained in that. Woke right is never contained in that. It's being used to attach Matt Walsh, Jonathan Peugeot, R.M. McIntyre, all these different thinkers with all these different ways of analyzing the liberal order and lumping them all into something like where this is not the truth. This is not the way. Liberalism is the true way. And then also it protects liberalism from liberals from having to just really honestly view whether their ideology is based on reality or it's based on a particular people who can affect it to a particular degree based on their shared values that precede liberalism. That's a huge conversation. One way of looking at at analyzing the right and to lift up the voices that you want and to either downplay or avoid voices that you don't want is think in terms of leadership. Who is a good leader? What is good leadership? And what is the aim of what is a good society? What kind of society do we want? And what kind of society is practical? Now, is that society racist? Can America really go back to racism? Can America really go back to sexism? To what degree is there an acceptable amount of racism or acceptable amount of sexism? And who gets to be sexist and who gets to be racist? Women are allowed to be sexist more than men are right now.
Currently,
And
yes,
men are now expressing their sexism. Black people are much more allowed to be racist than white people, and now white people are expressing their racism. I don't think that it's good for your heart to be racist, but I don't think it's bad for your heart to notice that there's different cultural differences, and I'd prefer to date this kind of person and not date that kind of person. I'd rather live in this area rather than that area. I'd rather have headphones in or be surrounded by a bunch of cell phones that are playing full blast on the bus. Like there's just different cultural sorting mechanisms. Those questions have salience, and we will have to allow for a certain amount of off-gassing of racism. And there's a way of increasing that by criticizing it, and there's a way of decreasing that by other means, ignoring it, downplaying it, not responding to it, not. I don't think that anybody's solved of their prejudice by an outside force. I don't think anybody was cured of racism by reading an article online.
No.
Cured of wokeism. I think that
No.
there was a preponderance of evidence that was articulated well by certain of our friends that helped them to understand the phenomena, but usually it was they were
And then
either
they
in
had a
it
heart change.
or their heart changed. There's some sort of
Yeah.
spiritual click, and that's a worldview change. Racism is just like that. Any sort of policing of any sort of really strong ethical system that needs to enforce itself by coercive or very strong lowbrow persuasive means, it's lowbrow, it'll manifest on the left, the right, and the center too. It's just a certain number of people don't know how to be good leaders and how to persuade other people to their side. That's just
Yes. Well, a couple things there. Um, you mentioned a few times, not just there, but earlier, you're talking about classical liberals are sort of wielding this phrase. And
yep.
I did want to make this point. I would be remiss if I didn't make this point. Perhaps because of the circles I'm in online on X. Most of the people I see legitimately who are making arguments against what is being called woke right are conservative Christians. And I'm talking about longtime conservatives.
Like
Um,
Neil
pe- People
and
who kneel, but actually, no, people like
Joel.
um, Lucas. No. Oh, you mean Joel Berry?
Yeah, Barry.
Yes, like Joel Berry, Lucas Curcio, Cody Lawrence, Mikhail Olson, Will Spencer. Will Spencer's not a longtime conservative. But he is a Christian. He is a conservative Christian now. But a lot
Hmm.
of these guys, like Lucas, they've been conservatives their whole life. Um,
What does that
and so
mean?
much.
How do you
Well, I
know
mean, as they're
conservative?
adult, as an adult, I'm talking about these are people who believe in. I think you would probably say the most conservative policy positions. Like they believe in strong borders. They believe in mass deportations. They support biblical patriarchy. They support patriarchy. They believe in the traditional family. They're against gay marriage. They don't believe that abortion should be legal. That very classically conservative positions, and
And they're anti-racist or non-racist.
they are non, I guess you would say, racist. No, they're not the leftist invention of anti-racist, which is when the leftists use that word, they mean racist against white people.
Yeah.
but but no, they don't believe, like, for example, um, Samuel Say, who I mentioned earlier. Some of these guys are now doing debates and doing conversations and trying to talk about, like, hey, this idea that we should be, that some are pushing, who claim to be on the right, are pushing this idea that we should be, as Christians, more Machiavellian. Okay, this is something that C.J. Engel and Andrew Isker are pushing. They're like, we need to become more, we need to push Machiavellianism. We need to become more deceitful and manipulative like the left. We need to use Saul Alinsky tactics. We need to pursue power at all costs. Well, ding, ding, ding. As a former woke lefty, all of that's familiar to me because that is the woke left. I mean, that's not Christianity. And so I've been interviewing a lot of these Christian conservative men,
Yeah.
and they don't agree on everything, but they agree on, they are very critical of what they call woke right. And I think because a lot of them are because they are Christian, perhaps um, they're conveniently ignored, or maybe it's just they don't have, their platforms aren't as big as someone like a James Lindsay or someone, and so people aren't familiar. Maybe people really don't know that this is happening in the Christian world, that there's this kind of battle happening. You know, the woke left invaded churches, and now some people are standing up and saying, hey, I see this other thing now invading churches that's also not very Christian, that says black people can't be saved, or that
Oh,
that
hold
white
on.
people are more blessed by God.
Yeah,
Like,
that is a distinct belief from we should treat politics as the real struggle for power that it is and be honest about that in order to win, because we can't do anything if we don't win. And the left has won because we decided to win is not Christian. The Machiavellianism, Schmittianism, is just a description of how politics works. That is distinct. That mode of political engagement is distinct from black people don't have souls. Like, and to tie those two things together is to continually place conservative Christians in a losing position because they don't want to win. I mean, I understand the Aaron McIntyre and the Iskers of the world saying this is how politics works. We need to use persuasion and coercion judiciously in order to secure power, in order to rule the government that we want, and to rule the world as we see fit to rule. That's distinct than black people don't have souls.
no, but let's talk about Esker, not Esker, but his colleague C.J. Engel, in his thread about how Christians need to become more Machiavellian.
Okay.
He says some of us basically have to be cryptic so we can gain power, and we can't be liking the Hitler memes and stuff that you guys like, that the Anons can do, and you guys, the Anons, basically, you can be. He didn't say Antifa, but he's sort of saying you guys can be brutal. You guys can do the things we can't do. It's sort of like he's treating them like the extremist arm. Like, you can push the boundaries and you can post all this stuff that we agree with. But there's that kind of like that we agree with, but we
Yeah.
can't openly like it because we have to get power first. And I'm like, that to me, on its face, I recoil at that because
Yeah.
that is not the imitation of Christ. It's not.
That's
It's
fair.
something different. That's what I think about that. But you're right. Okay, let me address your point. I do think you're right that the term is being wielded. I see it. And I see it because I get called to account for it. And I'm like, but I didn't say that. Where people are like, hey, can you defend somebody called Matt Walsh woke right? And I'm like, well, I didn't. He's not woke right. Quit calling that.
Yeah.
Like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about? And they're like, defend this. I'm like, no, because I didn't say that. I don't believe it. But I do agree that it's right now it's in flux. What does it mean? And then I see people like Tim Pool.
Tim
Now
Cast. I'm like,
is his last name. That's how we are online. When you're online, we're in this new modern world where you're online and you just know handles, like
yeah,
the
right.
handle.
This guy named Tim
Last name
Cast.
Cast, first name. Anyway, Tim Pool, he we had to have a laugh. He was saying now. So now I've seen he is using woke right to mean, I guess, like liberals, like Lindsay. So he's using it to say like James Lindsay is woke right. So it is in that flux. It's in flux right now where it's
It's
being.
just a political tool. It doesn't really.
But I think you don't think it's going to become nailed down because woke did that too. Woke was all over the place,
It
and
will
people
be
were
nailed
arguing.
down by the New York Times to completely shut down the entire right, e-right. That's how it's going to be used, and it will
You're
be
afraid.
broken. It will be broken by the e-right. I keep on asking James to come on here, and I don't want to disagree with him in public because it's kind of a bitchy thing to talk behind
You guys
his
should
back.
talk.
I keep on asking about it, but like there's certain you can't invent a political bludgeon and then only keep it to yourself. You can't start going around knocking on a hornet's nest and expect the hornets not to come out. And I told him this in a private DM that I just disagree with him. I think there's honey in the right-wing hornet's nest. And I'm not going to, and you're bashing it. And that's the blowback you're getting is by bashing a hornet's nest when you could be getting actual honey out of it. You could actually be seeing what these people are creating intellectually. And it's rife with all of this coded language that's ironically fascist, and that was useful for a time to keep liberals out, is to keep people away from it, to make it off limits, and to code itself as something that could not be talked about, as something that's subversive and outside of the realm of acceptable opinion. And they, if any of those ideas need to mature, they need to be stripped of the stuff that disgusts people and really refined. And I think that a lot of Yarvin's ideas, a lot of the Burnham ideas, a lot of these post-liberal thinkers on the right are really onto something about human nature and and about political power that is more honest than the liberal constitution, how liberalism has constituted society as of the people, by the people, and for the people, but actually just a bureaucratic mess of government leeching speech from people, leeching association from people, and doing the opposite of what it claims to do. I lost my thing, but anyways, so
There's honey in the
there's
hive, is
honey
what you're
over there.
saying.
There's honey in the hive. And if you go and you bash the hive, you're going to get a specific reaction. And these people on the right that we see swarming about with these really nasty stingers, they came of age on 4chan, not Tumblr. The woke left was on Tumblr. The woke right, or whatever that is, came from 4chan. They are not going to be cowed by being called names. You cannot call them bad names. They've taken every bad name in the book and they've internalized it, and they've played with that. They've marketed. They're the ones who came up with "it's okay to be white," or
Yes, I know. It's great.
this is white supremacy, right?
Yes, but
You can't
now
use woke right against them.
no, to help distinguish it from actual conservatism, I do think it is useful. The same way that woke left being distinguished from liberalism was useful. So a lot of let me.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
We're
I'm
finally
trying
getting
to
to the parts
formulate.
where we
Yeah,
disagree. We're finally getting to the parts where we definitely disagree. So you mentioned gatekeeping earlier. So for
yeah,
example,
which is always going to happen.
the
It's just
way it's always going to
who's the
happen,
gatekeeper.
right? But the way I view that on the left is so there's freedom of speech. There should I believe in I'm a free speech absolutist. I don't believe the government's job is to come in and say, you know, you can't speak and say your ideas. And like I said earlier, I disagree with these so-called anti-Semitic hate speech laws. I agree. I disagree with those. But with great power, whatever degree of power or influence you have, even if it's just in your life and your community, that's like the greatest influence you could have. If you have influence with your family first and then your community outward, and then some people have huge platforms who have become the powerful in a, like this was the point I think Murray was trying to make with Rogan. He actually had to say to Smith at one point, you have power, because Smith was criticizing the powerful institutions, rightly so. They were all criticizing the powerful institutions, the media that had let us down and lied to us and pushed propaganda. And and Murray sort of said, but you have power now. The new media has rightfully so begun to dominate the old media. And with great power comes great responsibility. And I believe, again, to go back to the way I view the world, my worldview as a Christian,
Yeah.
we have a responsibility. We're going to be held to account one day for every word that comes out of our mouth. We're going to be held to account. And so you have to be discerning, especially if you're someone that wields a lot of, I guess, like influence, like some of these huge podcasters do. You
Mm-hmm.
should be discerning. And if you're not, if you make bad choices, you should also expect that with free speech, you are going to get criticism for what people view as bad choices. That will happen too. Like, hey, why did you let this person? I'll give an example. Since we mentioned Tate before, Benny Johnson had Andrew Tate on, not to talk to him about the pending charges
Mm-hmm.
for, um, you know, exploitation of women, for having sex with a minor, which are still pending. None of that. He brought him on just to like puff him up and like promote him, and he had Alina Haba on to talk about what a fangirl she was, and it to me that was a very bad choice. It's like, why are
Mm-hmm.
you promoting? at the very same time that we are all demanding accountability for Epstein's crimes, then you're putting up this unrepentant pornographer who has pending charges of, the exploitation of women, sexual exploitation of women, and sex with a minor, and who is on video admitting all this stuff himself. I don't trust the media. I don't trust what the media says about Tate. I trust what he has said, what he has admitted to. This is how I form my opinion.
Hmm.
And you have him on and you're promoting him to your audience who's an actual, like, you probably have very many sincere Christians and conservatives in your audience, and you're trying to sell this predator to them. That's the way I viewed it. That's a very bad choice. Should you be allowed to do it? Absolutely. That's free speech. Should you expect through free speech criticism for that from people who think they're disappointed? Yes, you should expect it. And what I didn't like was that there seemed to evolve. This is getting back to your point about gatekeeping. There seemed to evolve this idea evolving that, like, if you even suggest that people take on any degree of shoulder any responsibility, like we each shoulder our own, we decide how responsible are we going to be or not. If you even suggest that people do that you're somehow anti-free speech. No, I'm not. And actually, here's the problem with the left. The liberals did not do any gatekeeping at all. They let the craziest and most anti-liberal Marxist identitarianism, authoritarianism, they let tyranny, they let psychopaths and sociopaths not just invade the left, but they made them famous. They put them on pedestals. They, Ibram X. Kendi, Robin DiAngelo, like, they put their crazy extremists, they let them take over until it completely destroyed the left and the Democratic Party. It turned it into something monstrous, and it almost destroyed our country. And so, do I believe in personal responsibility for the things that we speak and do and our behavior and who we choose with our freedom of association to elevate?
With. Yeah.
Then yes, I do believe in that. And I think if you don't do that, you'll be ruled by sociopaths. That's what I think about that. We probably disagree. Now we're getting into the meat of it, right?
Well, Murray's a whole thing. And
yeah.
The way he spoke and how he delivered his message was not correct, in my opinion. But, does Rogan have an effect on culture? And insofar as he does have an effect, is he responsible for that effect? Yeah. When somebody says we should platform this or not platform that, or platform balanced views, I think that's it's a good ideal, but it's kind of naive. And it makes me itchy.
Yeah.
Because I've been talking to these people. I've been talking to these right-wing people. And some of them are rather racist online. I'm like, whoa, well, you didn't bring that up in my conversation. You're really personable. And like, we got into how you think, and I felt like I got a picture of who you actually are rather than just your punditry online. And then they're like, oh, well, you're rather a racist. Now we're friends. So am I now, like, now I'm associated with that? And how deeply, how strictly am I associated with any given person that I so-called platform? To what degree does 96,000, and please subscribe to my channel, I want to hit 100,000. How many, to what degree do I have more wiggle room because I'm kind of a marginalized voice, right? To what degree did I have power in the gender wars by platforming all of those? By actually consciously and openly saying, I'm not going to talk to the trans rights activists. They want to control speech, so I'm going to talk to everybody else. Like, when people say that this person is woke right or that person's woke right, my first impulse is to invite them on my channel and hear them out. Like, hear them out. And to what degree, if I was Rogan, am I broadcasting, am I platforming this person? To what degree am I kind of just this little intellectual curiosities cabinet where Benjamin will just talk to a bunch of people? been able to
You
just
do.
talk to a bunch of people, right? So I just platforming or deplatforming or not platforming. I used it strategically. And of course, I'm doing it politically to some degree, but to what degree am I doing it? To what degree am I afforded to talk to all these undesirable people? Right?
Benjamin, what is you know what is your aim? You know what your aim is. If your aim is a pursuit of truth and to better understand people,
Yeah.
you know that. And I think that comes through with the audience. Like that's we are all just, we have to be discerning. We have to look and sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. But I look at you as someone who is pursuing truth and understanding. I want, talking with you about this is
I guess
I want to
understanding.
understand I want to understand your perspective more and you want to understand mine.
Yeah.
And that is not what that's very different from like if you had Tate on, I assume you would also be trying to like pull out what this man really is.
Yeah.
I just think it would be a very different conversation than this just sort of empty, to me, meaningless uh, promotion of him that I saw
Yeah.
on Johnson's channel, and just I mean, I'm sorry, it's disgusting to me, and that's very different, and so it's not about like platforming or not platforming. It's about each person just admitting like, hey, I have I have I have freedom of choice. I have freedom of
Yeah.
association and I have free speech for now. And so I have responsibility for all those choices I make. God gives us free will and we each take on that burden. Somebody was like, "Well, who gets to decide?" I'm like, "You do. You get to decide. And you're responsible for how you and I'm responsible for how I engage in the world. Do I make mistakes? Yes. And have I, by the way, interviewed people who later I found out more about them and I was like, oh gosh, like I
We're
regret
not going to
that.
name any of those names.
But, right. But well, I was like, oh gosh, I'm glad I didn't get like a boiled in a bunny boiler. No kidding. No,
Yeah.
I just, we all make mistakes and we all sometimes lack discernment and all
Yeah.
but I don't agree with people who outright say like no gatekeeping. I don't agree with that because the left didn't gatekeep and I saw what happened. We have sheepdogs. If you think about the Christian, like the church
Huh.
for example, like
Yeah.
we need strong male figures like elders in the church who keep out the false shepherds and the predators. And there's so much scripture about false shepherds. And as I mentioned earlier in Timothy, it talks about how women are more somewhat more susceptible to these false shepherds. We need sheepdogs. And and I believe in that. Like we need a shepherd. That's Christ. Like we need someone to protect us and we need in our churches and in our spaces like yes, I want people who are discerning who are like whoa, that's not a baby, as to reference Jordan Peterson recently, that's not a baby, that's a serpent. Like we're going to keep that serpent away from the flock, right?
Hmm.
So that's how I view that. But I mean I think we probably agree on more than we don't. That's why it's kind
Yeah.
of interesting to get to the parts where we disagree.
Yeah. I don't, you bring up truth. Like I'm looking for truth. I don't know. Understanding, I understand. Like, yeah, I'm seeking understanding. I don't know what truth is. I don't think that truth is something that I can contain without being burnt by it in some way, whether being puffed up by my ego or by falsely seeing it or falsely using truth. But understanding is more human sized to me as a pursuit. And we are all playing a game. Twitter is an MMORPG. It's a massively multiplayer online role-playing game played with sentences. We're all propagandists. We're all, even though, even no matter to what degree we claim that we're pursuing truth, we're all already mired in games of power and games of status. And I think Jordan Peterson's early work, he embraces that. We are lobsters. Like these hierarchies are a part of us. And there will be a lot of Machiavellian games going on. And there's certain tools that the left has developed that are now open game because it's war. It's a game, it's war. So public shaming it's Puritan. It's not woke, you know? Like cancel culture is Puritan. That's not woke. That's Puritan. Like if you look at the history of Puritanism, cancel culture has been around. It's
Oh,
just
it's
a
been
part of it.
around
It's
forever,
just
but they used it. Purity spirals and all that,
yeah.
you know?
So and so I think I approach the e-right with an open mind. I do see this footsie with fascism on a aesthetic level, but I don't see how that scales at all beyond shitposting. And so that's why I think it's just a bad tactic. It allows for young men to let off steam, but I don't think it really scales. And so I don't think anybody who wants to be a leader of those young men is wise in promoting it. And then I'm the one who just made fun of Kanye's lyrics by casting them as a wigger, you know, like wigger Heil Hitler kind of lyrics. Like here's what these young white men are thinking right now.
Did you see that comedian who put himself in the video, the white comedian? I think he might have been Jewish.
No.
It's so funny. I don't know his name. Somebody in the chat probably knows. He's like talking to the director. He inserted himself in the video and he's like, I'm okay with saying the Heil Hitler part, but should I say the N-word?
Yeah, right.
He's like,
Kanye is another guy who's just blessed with guidance because that thing hit like a week after that Shiloh lady. Like a week
yeah.
after the N word became like this huge viral phenomenon, like then Kanye puts that and pairs that. So I appreciate Jonathan Peugeot's breakdown. He has it on his channel of what Kanye's doing and where that shows us
Oh, I
how
haven't seen
the
that.
post World War II order is falling apart because as a myth it can't hold water forever. And we are in a sort of free fall. We are in a sort of we're wrestling for the soul of our youth and for the myth of our ethnos. And America has multiple ethnicities, but we still have an ethnogenesis that binds us together. What is that going to be? It was forged by wars every single time. Will the next one be a war that forges it? Or will it be like a fourth generation meme war, a mimetic war? And
Hmm.
is that what Trump is showing us? That we can do this without, well, I mean, he did take a bullet, but without bloodshed, we can possibly do this.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know if it scales either. My sense is that it won't, at least for several generations, if it ever did scale. The what you're talking about, the
The fascistic, yeah.
fascistic footsie is what you called it. I do think it's possible it could scale only because, again, I never thought woke left would scale, and it did. So I don't know.
Hmm.
But I think it might be more likely what I worry about is that it is used as a weapon by the woke left now that they have suffered some cultural an amount of cultural defeat. They're losing their grip on identity groups that they've claimed to speak for and represent. I think it could be used as a weapon by them to weaken people who oppose the woke. I think it could be used because they get to point now, and I've seen them do this. The corporate media, they get to point to people like Fuentes and say, "Look, see what Trump supporters say," and I'm like. He's not even a Trump supporter. He didn't even vote for Trump. He told his followers not to vote for Trump. These people are so like I think in his case sociopathic tendencies. I just think he'll say and do anything. And but they get to point to him now and say, "Look, this is America first. This is conservatism. This is Christianity." And it's none of those things. They
Huh.
get to use him as a weapon against conservatives. They get to use these fringe elements as a weapon. And
That has
it
always
and
been
yes,
a very winning tactic for even
yeah,
conservative centrists to control the right.
yes. But I think the other thing I'm worried about is people in real life who are sincere and get pulled into this. I do worry about that because look, on the left, the people at the top who were pushing woke, I think you see a lot more of those as Peterson and Lindsay were talking about the sociopathic traits. I think you see a lot more like con artistry and people who are frauds who are doing it for clicks, for money, for power, whatever. They're pushing woke left for personal gain, to be able to abuse people, to be able to control people for power, all of that, right? But if you look at the followers, a lot of the followers, not all, okay, but a lot of the followers, there are people who are sincere, who've bought into it, who have been brainwashed by this crap,
Hmm.
and who have fallen into this darkness. And some of them, Monique Dusson, she's a great person to talk to. She was a woman who was in the woke left part of the church for 20 years before she realized what it was and how racist it was against white people, and she left it. And but they sucked in people like that. They suck in people who really believe it, sincerely believe it. And so I'm worried about this because I've already
Hmm.
seen some people. I'm not talking about you. I'm saying people I know in real life. I'm saying there are people who I see who are becoming sympathetic to this
Yeah.
sort of like, maybe the Jews do. They are uniquely nefarious and they control everything, and and I'm like, humans, we're all sinners. Like, we're equally sinners.
Yeah.
Are there differences in ethnicity that you've talked about? Absolutely. Go read Charles Murray, like Human Biodiversity. He talks about there are differences in ethnic populations, and the left is, they would call that hate facts and racist. It's not racist to talk about that. It's like there are differences between the sexes. Duh. Like biological differences. Duh. Like, it's not sexist to point this out, to acknowledge those. But when you get to this dark, resentful place where you can only think of people as these like identity group members, and it inspires a hatred or resentment in you, that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about people leading others into that place of like, I'm going to show you the door to God, and then but that the door is straight to the devil. Like, that does concern me.
Hmm.
So I hope we're not talking past each other.
No, I hear you. I 8 years ago in a week, the Evergreen State College erupted in a racial protest, the likes of which the world would not see until 2020. That's how I got on the map. And what happened, I was watching all that stuff that we call woke festering and being promoted by the leadership, by the professors, and then used by the students to effect a total temper tantrum that didn't go anywhere except for more bureaucratic control over speech and resource management. But there was this moment after the campus erupted, and it was something spiritually black, dark, swallowed that campus, and it was frightful. Like going back on campus after the eruption happened, it was scary. And one
Yeah.
thing happened to me. I was coming from the parking lot to go to my job on campus, and a black guy came around the corner and started walking towards me, and the first thing that I felt was a physical sense of dread and preparation for attack. And that was the first explicitly racist feeling that I think I ever had. And that caused me to be so angry with the institution and with their
Mhm.
program that it sent me on a journey of dismantling it, of like, no, this is my enemy. I'm going to destroy this thing. And the thing exhausted itself. So I do want to be aware of the same principalities, the same forces in the human heart that are brewing and circulating in this post woke right. And some of it's there, and it's just not good for the soul. It's not good for the
Yeah.
soul. And it's right next to all these other ideas. Like all this other ideas about reconsidering our history, reconsidering what we call liberalism, are percolating, and right next to it, because it all got cast out. All this stuff got cast out. So they're all kind of living among each other, and they've made kind of tentative friendships where they get along and they don't fight amongst each other, but they do. They erupt in these drama fights because everybody's a bitch online. But I want to engage with the people and the ideas in such a way that we can distinguish or discern the wheat from the chaff,
Yes.
the rot from the new growth, and it's all kind of happening in the same kind of compost that has been
Yes.
shoved out of acceptable discourse. And so I'm kind of like walk softly and carry a open mind kind of guy, which tends to allow me to forgive things and to not interact with things or call out things that you're bringing attention to. But I am attentive to them, and I'm attentive to them. I'm attentive to them in my own heart. I do have like, why do the Jews keep on getting ahead in the world? Like I had that for a while. Like why every artist that I like, early life Jew. I'm like, why do I not have that? And I had resentment. I had a lot of resentment in me when I was mid-20s, and I realized that I was not performing my role as a man. I was not working really hard. I was not believing in myself, and I was not believing in family. All the values that I saw Jewish people emulating, and the fruit of that being success, I was envious of the success because I was lacking in the values. I was lacking in fulfilling my own values, and so I looked inside of my heart.
It's
And
Cain and Abel. It's
as
Cain
soon
and
as I
Abel.
saw that, I like it doesn't matter if you're Jew or Gentile or whatever. There's something else going on, and the hatred that I was festering in was about resentment because I was pathetic. You know, I've interacted with the red pill guys. If you listen to them long enough, they just start bitching about women, and you're like, "This is you're what are we, a bunch of twats now?" Like literally, like you guys are exhibiting like a extreme lack of testicular fortitude. Go and build a shed, and a woman will move into it. Come on, you know,
Yes.
right?
Go go in a lot of these guys in that manosphere space, I don't think they spend a lot, well, they're online a lot, which
Yeah,
is a more
that's a
feminine
problem.
thing. It's a more feminine kind of toxicity. But they, yeah, like go out and we, my husband and I moved like 100 bricks the other day. That'll clear your mind.
Yeah,
Go move
right.
some bricks.
Talk about
Uh
touching grass.
yeah, we were out there in the sun. That got, because I've been feeling a bit demoralized about all the fighting online, and
Yeah,
you go outside and you move 100 bricks in the sun, and you're like, okay, it's not that bad.
you
Life
posted
still
that.
goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah, life goes on. Um, there was
I
something you said though. Well, I have to go to a
Yeah, you got to
graduation.
go. Okay, you got to go. You should probably bounce. Oh wow, we went way over. So you got to go.
Okay,
All right, I'm gonna spend some time reading some super chats. Keri, thank you so much. I will link
Benjamin,
to your work in the
thank you so
description.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking about this, and for anyone in the chat. Look, we can disagree about this and talk with each other. Hopefully, and remain like somewhat civil. I really think that's possible, and I appreciate you, Benjamin. I think you are a good example of that online in
Yeah.
your conversation. So
Yeah. Thank you very much, Keri Smith of Deprogramming. Have a good graduation for your friends.
thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. She bounced. Hey guys, this is Benjamin Boyce. I'm just going to read some super chats and then wrap up. Go hang out with my family. Giovanni Adami, woke right is a way for civic nationalists and secular liberals to attack nationalists and liberals. Populist nationalists, economic nationalists, ethnic nationalists, Christian nationalists, etc. I wonder if there is possibly a coalition between the populist, economic, ethnic, and Christian nationalists. How do those things interact? Where do they contradict? I think that there's a lot of fruitful ideas that are being bandied about by those different strains. And it is unfortunate that this woke right label is used to collapse that diversity of thought into one lump and then not really afford proper analysis to occur. And then Giovanni, another super chat. Jeffersonians and Hamiltons called Adams a monarchist to shut him down because they couldn't beat him in debate. In liberal nationalism, everyone is an enemy. Debate doesn't win, silencing does. I wonder to what extent debate actually works, and there are some forms of debate that I think are more fruitful than others. Yarvin, Curtis Yarvin through Passage Press. They have a YouTube channel. Go check it out. He had a dialogue with a Harvard professor. I don't think it was that fruitful because she was not able to actually speak to Curtis, and Curtis at the end actually had to take her position. I'm not totally endorsing Curtis, but it seemed like that debate could have been a lot better, but it was a lot better than other debates because both people were respectful and gave each other enough time to speak their position and for the audience to suss it out. To what degree the people that I call classical liberals, or who Adami called liberal nationalists, are able or can afford debate in this marketplace of ideas, I think is a case-by-case basis, and some people do it better. And I think that the speech controls that have been foisted upon the right have actually led to a lot of honing of the right's ability to have nuanced debates, whereas the classical liberals gained a lot of traction being anti-woke, and they had the low-hanging fruit of dealing with transgender silliness and woke silliness, and they are not they don't seem to be at the level that the right is right now with their debate chops. And so the debates haven't been, even when they do happen, haven't been as productive for the liberal cause. So hopefully liberals will hone their position, hone their debate skills, and not rely on left-coded means of guilt by association, of platforming and deplatforming, and just directly approach the arguments and one by one consider them, and then also be self-reflective to see whether or not certain maneuvers that the left and the right are adopting around power politics, liberals also adopted and also need to adopt, because that is just human nature. We're tribal. We have a lust for power. We feel really big hits of dopamine when we win, and losses are negative dopamine when we lose. And winning is kind of a part of what we want to do. Like, we all want to win. So why deny the process of winning? But I think Keri brought up a lot of good questions around which tactics are actually morally superior to other tactics. What tactics are sinister, and to what degree does coercive force and persuasive force abide by a high moral standard, and to what degree does it fail certain moral standards? Clue Studio, Super Chat. I think the woke right is real. Quote unquote woke simply denotes the willingness to cancel someone for an opposing opinion. I think the woke center is real then. I think the woke left is real then. I think that canceling someone for an opposing opinion is low-hanging fruit that will be deployed in lieu of spending too much time, wasting too much time from your point of view in engaging in good faith with people. Sometimes we just want to call a spade and move on, and sometimes that spade ends up in the deplorables basket. I try not to do that myself, but I do that myself, especially with lefties. I have low tolerance for leftism, and that's a moral failure on my part. Maybe not. Tune in, drop out. Tribalism served as a survival mechanism in our evolutionary past, but as the world becomes smaller and more interconnected, we need a mechanism in our cultural software to shift away from tribality toward a familial model. I think that the interesting phenomena online is that we are creating families around ideology, families around agreement and vibe. I think that is productive to a certain degree, but you still have internecine tribal warfare going on. And I think that the internet, when properly used, can be a way of turning war into sport and deciding things by trial by combat, where two people duking it out takes the place of two armies duking it out. I think that tribal sport, winning and losing, can be modified culturally into something that uses violence symbolically rather than in actuality. And then Andrew Joyner just gives me a basic super chat. So you guys, thank you very much for tuning in. I will link to Keri's work down in the description. Like, subscribe, donate. All the links will be down there in the description. If you enjoy this content, follow me on X, Benjamin A. Boyce, and on YouTube, Benjamin A. Boyce. This is me signing off. Have a good weekend. God bless.